Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
Hello, welcome to the Empowerment Zone. I am your host, Ramona Houston, and today we have an artist with us. He is Gregory Perrin, who is a dynamic leader, fundraiser, and artist with over 30 years of experience in nonprofits, higher education, community engagement, and the performing arts. Currently, he is the Associate Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. Gregory serves on the Mid-America Arts Alliance and Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, U.S., Canada, regional boards, and the Advisory Council for the Armstrong Community Music School. He has both undergraduate and graduate degrees in theater from the Catherine G. McGovern College of the Arts at the University of Houston. He is married to LaMonica Guillory Perrin and has an adult son, Oliver, who is an actor as well. Gregory is from San Antonio and currently lives in Austin, Texas. Welcome, Gregory.
Hey, Ramona, it's so good to be here. Thank you.
I am so happy to have you and excited to have you as especially as an artist. I mean, you can talk about fundraising as well, but today we're going to talk about the arts.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and your work, your professional work, your personal life? Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
I'll be happy to. Well, I have been involved, as you've mentioned, for over 30 years in community organizations as well as nonprofits, and been fundraising. I'm fundraising leader and manager for most of that time, well over 25 years. But my arts really started, I think probably when I was 5 or 6, if I can recall. The first time I made a public address was reciting the 23rd Psalms.
I knew you were going to go there, church. It had to be church.
You knew you were going to go to church. You know, I had to go to church. And what's so interesting in this memory, all these, 40 plus years have passed, but I will never forget that my mother promised me a sweet and sour sucker if I did this and did it appropriately, right, during church. And so all I was thinking about, and at that time as a 5 or 6 year old, the 23rd Psalms might as well been, reciting Hamlet or something.
Yes.
And so I got through it, and all I could think about when I got home was the sucker, which was kept on top of the refrigerator, right? So I just went in and got that, and she was happy and all that. I start there because it is significant that it started in church. Yes. And I think a lot of the creative arts for people start in church. Yes. Especially people of color, African Americans, singing, performing in church. And that's just a nurturing ground for us. And it definitely was for me. So from elementary school all the way through high school, I performed in theater, did speech and debate, and of course the church was along with that. I did the Christmas pageant, I did the Easter pageant, I sang in choir. But it was interesting when I applied to go to university. All of my friends were applying to be engineers and going to engineering schools at UT, Prairie View, and all these places. And that was the clique I rolled with. So I said, I'm going to go to engineering school too. Had never thought about engineering. Could not probably tell you what an engineer did. But I did that and did not become an engineer, as you can tell. But I share that story because throughout my college experience, theater was still there. I performed in theater and just ended up getting to a point where it's like, let me just do what I want to do and not what people are expecting me to do. And so majored in theater, finished undergraduate and graduate there, had a wonderful time at the University of Houston, and went on. And through graduate school, it was in graduate school that my writing as a playwright really kicked in. And I had written little, vignettes before then, but just for my own entertainment. And so, right after I finished graduate school, I submitted a script to the Edward Albee playwriting workshop, which was housed at the University of Houston, and it performed at Stages Theater in Houston, and was accepted. And my play was produced, and actually I was fortunate to work with Mr. Albee 3 times, one as an undergrad and then after I graduated. And that was a really transforming experience, because from there, someone contacted me about writing a play and for their theater. And at that point, I had not written a play professionally. And so that started, and 20 years later, I've gotten 5 commissions. 4 of them were at the Theater Lab there in Houston, and 1 has been with the Pollyanna Theater in Austin, Texas. And so that's kind of been my journey. There's a lot more detail to that. I've been in, over 15 plays, different commercials, extras in movies and things of that nature. And so it's just been a wonderful journey to experience, I guess, my passion, which is performing, which is theater. And you may say, well, but you're a fundraiser and you worked in all these nonprofits. I think my theater background has prepared me in many ways to be an engaging person, to listen, to be present, and all those are qualities that I bring every day to my job when I'm engaging alumni and donors around their passion for St. Edward's University. In addition, writing is very critical. And I'm fortunate that I enjoy writing. I enjoy, putting words to paper and creating ideas. And I use that skill every day. And so I'm just fortunate to be where I am. So thank you for that.
Thank you for telling us about your background. I knew it began in the church. And what is so interesting about the Black church is not only is it a spiritual development place, it's also a social and cultural institution where it's so many gifts that are molded in the Black church. You talked about the arts. We know leadership is leadership development. When you talk about organizational development, you learn Robert Rules of Order in the Black church, and
that's right.
Just so many ways the church shapes the African-American experience and molds our talent. But moving forward and looking at the arts as your purpose. You weren't meant for engineering. You were meant for the arts, and how the arts transcends just being a performer and writer, but also it really informs how you do your work as a development leader at your institution. Thank you so much for sharing how your skills of performing and writing informs your work as a fundraiser. So I know that you have a recent project that you have worked on, that you've written. Congratulations on being commissioned to write several plays. But this one is your most recent project is called Liberty, Equality, and Fireworks. Can you tell us a little bit about that particular play, how you got into doing it, what its significance is, and how is it doing now? Tell us about that project.
I'll be happy to. Thank you so much. So Liberty, Equality, and Fireworks premiered in 2014, and it was commissioned by the Pollyanna Theater Company in Austin, Texas. And it was commissioned to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And Pollyanna is a professional theater company that performs for family audiences and including children. And so it's adult actors, professional actors performing works that have been original works that are recently commissioned to entertain and move ideas and motivate children in their character development and things of that nature. And it's a phenomenal organization, and I'm very proud to be associated with them. And so they asked me to commission, to write a piece that would commemorate the Civil Rights Act of 64 for family audiences, but really geared toward that 4th and 5th grader. And I will say that I was excited to write about this material, but challenged in many ways to how do we talk about separate but equal? How do we talk about these themes of racial injustice with 4th and 5th graders? And it's been very exciting because not only has the play been produced since, about 5 times since 2014, annually here in Austin, with the collaboration with the LBJ Presidential Library here in Austin. But many of the attendees have been even into, I think we've had a class of 7th graders come to see the play. And so over 10,000 families and kids have seen this production. And so it's very significant work. The challenge that I think we achieved in this piece is there's no space in our community, in our society, where children are at the table or even part of the conversation when we talk about civil rights. And to me, that was my entry point into this piece. It is how do we give them the nomenclature, the words, and share with them the experiences of the civil rights era and contextualize that for them in a way that they understand that separate but equal is not equal, and the history and the basis of inequality and what does that mean for our society. And so those are some of the themes that I had to wrestle with. And so the play enters, we get into the play with a class of 4th and 5th graders going on a field trip. And of course, anyone, even, when we were in school, we were like ready to be out of school. We're going to have some fun. And these students wanted to do that. And so they're thinking they're going to the mall, they're going to a park, movie theater somewhere, and they end up at a history museum. And let me tell you, they are not happy about that. And so that's how we get into it. And so there's a piece I'd like for us to play, the entry piece, and this is a recording of the premiere performance. And what you'll hear is the students have really dismissed their principal, and they've just said, we don't want to be at this museum. We're just going to sit here and do nothing because we're not having fun. And the principal, not the principal, but the teacher who's with them storms off to call the principal. And in this moment, something, we'll say magical happens. If you're in the theater, you experience it. And another character comes out, a docent, and she addresses the students, and that's what you're about to hear. And I'll talk more once we hear this clip.
I like your style, students. You just made history.
What do you mean we made history?
We can't make history. 4th graders only make social studies.
Yeah, like history is in textbooks.
No, history is now. History is made every day. What you are doing now is called a sit-in. See these students? They did the same thing 50 years ago that you are doing now.
That's cool.
That's not cool. Having fun is cool, and we're not having any.
Okay, so what you hear is Ms. Torrey saying to the students, I like your style, because what the students did was they did a sit-in right there in the museum. And so she was encouraging them and showing them all the art on the walls and the pictures of different marches and whatever, and saying, you were just like these students. You made history. And of course, the students were like, fourth graders don't make history. But that's how we get into it. And so from there, the students go on a real interesting and sort of magical journey where they experience not only the sit-ins of the students from North Carolina A&T, Greensboro, and I pick one of the characters, one of the gentlemen, Franklin McLean, who is at the counter, and I pulled his character out. And so there's a character named Franklin, and he engages one of the students and talks about that moment. And then we move on to, the education disparities. And many people know about Brown versus the Board of Education, but not many people know about Mendez versus Westminster. Right? And that situation. So we pull out Sylvia Mendez from that scenario and walk through that. And one of the reasons why I did that was one, if you know, the whole play deals with characters that our students who are watching the play probably have never heard of in situations. So the play is not your typical legends of civil rights. Right? These are names and different scenarios. And I wanted to expand our awareness for the students of who's involved. And so there you get the Sylvia Mendez. And the other reason is because we're in Texas and there were Mexican schools in Texas. We talk about, Blacks being challenged in that area and Black students not being integrated and Black students being put in secondary schools, but our Mexican Americans were the same in that situation. And then we move on to a game in the play called Separate But Equal, and the students and the audience love this game. The actors really bring it to life. And there are several scenarios where we just talk about how things are just not, they're separate but equal. And the one that the students love is the girls are divided from the boys, and the girls get these plush seats, these plush, chairs and bean bags to sit on, and the boys have to sit on just a flat carpet. And they're like, this is not equal, right? And so the docent comes out and says, hey, you'd like a book? I know you want to read something. Girls get these beautiful books. Boys get these toe up from the flow up books, right? And they're like, are you serious? We can't read this. This was whatever. And then, okay, you want a snack? And the docent comes out and gives the boys a nice piece of, old church mint. Let's pull that church reference, right? That church mint. And then the boys are like, okay, we get some candy. And the girls get these beautiful, big, 5-inch colorful lollipops. And the boys have had it. They're like, we are done with this separate but equal. And the kids in the auditorium just erupt. They love that. But at their level, but that's how we see things, right? And that was purposeful because, the laws during that time were like, well, we're going to make separate but equal at a certain level, and so at a reasonable level. And so reasonable means the girls had some place to sit and the boys had some place to sit, but that was hardly separate. That was hardly equal. So it's a fun play, and those are some of the things we get to. And I think it's had its mark, and it does what it's supposed to do, because I will say this. At the end of the play, during the performances I'm able to attend, I usually go out into the lobby and wait for the kids to come out. And it's just wonderful to hear their expressions of what they experienced and what they thought, and how this character wasn't treated equal, and how that's not right, and how the girls got better candy than the boys, and that's not right. And so I appreciate the opportunity to have done that.
It sounds like a great play. It's very challenging, I'm sure, as an educator, and let alone be a playwright, to engage young people in 4th and 5th grade and teach them some key concepts, right? And for you to bring the so-called nameless and faceless people of the civil rights movement into the conversation where young people can see it's more than just those iconic names that we know, but it's a lot of people who contributed to the civil rights movement. And also, speaking of Sylvia Mendez, who I actually got to meet a couple of years ago, having her in the conversation, especially being in Texas, is so relevant. You know, Texas, a lot of people don't know, but Texas segregated both African Americans and Mexican Americans. And so here you're able to show how segregation just didn't affect Black people, it affected the Latinx community as well. And so I commend you for bringing that into the conversation. So my question is, you know, you talk about engaging young people in this play. What was your motivation? Like, how did you come about figuring out how to accomplish that task as a playwright?
A bit of research. I read, you know, probably 8 or 10 children's books around this topic. And then, of course, you know, your standard history information. And what I realized is there were children involved in this. And the play doesn't go to the activist piece, right? The play is really just introducing these students to these terms and the issues, but then, you know, there's reason to go to the next level of showing the activism. And what I mean by that is there were students there were children.
Yep,
you know,
Birmingham
school, yeah, yes. Elementary school, and on up, children affected by this. And you're right, the bombings in Birmingham and the children who marched along with their parents. There's an iconic picture, and this picture was one of the most motivating pictures for me. And to your point, I used photos to really guide me through this. And it was instrumental because the set of this play is projections. So there's just basically a white panel, and what you see is the different projections of the civil rights era, people marching, whites only signs and things of that nature. And there were several pictures that motivated me. One, the students at the counter, you know, in Greensboro. And then there's an iconic picture of a march, the March to Selma, I believe, of a young man in overalls, and he has "vote" written on his forehead, young man. And when I saw that, and this guy, I think I did the research, I think he was really around 18, late teens, early 20s, even though he looked like he was probably, you know, 14. Children were on the scene, right? And I'm not a historian by any means, but I know that there were conversations during the 50s and during the movement, we'll just say that, of how do we use children and should we use children, right? There were these conversations on both sides of the issue. And so what I wanted to show the students were that, one, history is made every day. You are making history now, and it's accessible. And if you know that, how are you using your time to make history? How are you improving things? And there's that's a very, subtle thing in the play. But the real direct piece in the play, the real direct plot is just one student, Harry, is sort of ostracized because of the way he dresses. And so all the students kind of push him to the side. And by the end of the play, they're more embracing of him. So it's the difference piece, right? And so, yeah, that's how I try to move into that piece.
Well, thank you for sharing. His play is Liberty, Equality, and Fireworks. And you can see that when? Is it being shown? Yes. So
we're probably, because of the pandemic, we had it scheduled for February. And the last few years, the partnership between Pollyanna Theater and the LBJ Presidential Library, we performed there. at the library. And so when we're able to do performances again, it will be done there. And definitely folks in Central Texas, Austin, and roundabout areas will know about that.
Well, thank you for sharing. And lastly, my last question is, how do you think the arts influences activism?
Tremendously. Let me say one thing about the play that I should have mentioned.
Okay.
For those folks who are listening who want to know more about the play, you can go to the Pollyanna Theater website. But also the play can tour. So it's performed in San Antonio, Waco. And so if you're interested in having it come to your community, that theater handles that, and they can talk with you more about that. The arts have always influenced advocacy, and we can talk about the performing arts being stage and music, but also movies and television. The arts, one, replicates and reflects society, but it also shows society what it can or shouldn't be.
Exactly.
And so, the arts are critical to activism in the sense of motivation. Seeing something can be portrayed, can be motivating and encouraging, which is, the goal of the play I wrote, but of a lot of the activism that's going on. You think about Marvin Gaye's music of the 60s and the 70s,
What's going on? And it's still relevant today.
Still relevant today. So, the arts are very motivating in that. And, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but for that reason, we need to invest in it.
Yes.
We should not sideline the arts and think that it is just for entertainment purposes, because we see in society right now on social media, on YouTube, that these vehicles are being leveraged. Things that we think may be entertaining and just, a fly by night are motivating people to do violent acts, as well as encouraging them to stand up and either vote or be an ally or be present for a neighbor. So,
Well, thank you so much for sharing this, your work in the arts with us. We really appreciate it. Again, the name of the play is Liberty, Equality, and Fireworks. And the Pollyanna Theater out of Austin, Texas is the one performing this play. And if you're interested, please do visit the Pollyanna Theater website if you're interested in bringing this play to your local theater. It can and should be played around the country, shown around the country, because it's so influential in educating and really engaging our young people. Thank you so much, Gregory. I am delighted to have you. And anytime you want to come on the Empowerment Zone, please feel free. You're welcome to talk about fundraising and development, and then talk about your next play or playwright. I
look forward to that.
Yes. The door is always open for you. Feel free to contact us. We'd love to have you on again.
Thank you, Ramona. This has been really a joy.
Thank you. Hello, today I have Mr. Gregory Perrin of Austin, Texas here, and he's going to give students who are aspiring to go to college or already in college his one piece of advice to succeed as you attend college. So, hi, Gregory. How are you today?
I am well. Thank you.
So tell us, what schools did you attend? What were your majors and degrees? And what one piece of advice would you give students for college success?
Okay, so I will start with the successes, and then I'll just give you more context for that.
Okay.
So I have a bachelor's degree in the arts in theater from the University of Houston, as well as a master's in fine arts in theater from the University of Houston. It took me 10 years to get both of those degrees. And so that's the success story. But I want to share that I attended probably 4 institutions, Okay, so started San Antonio College, community college, right out of high school the summer before I went to the University of Texas for my first undergraduate freshman experience. Transferred from the University of Texas to the University of Houston and then finished there. So in that 10-year span from graduation of high school to my master's, that was that experience. And I share that because it's really a testament to tenacity. And that's really what I want to encourage students. Stick with it. There were many days where I wanted to drop out, and definitely being an arts major, told my mom, you know what, I'm just going to go to New York and be an actor. And my mother would just encourage me, son, stick with it. I'll help you, whatever. And even if you don't have that parental or somebody supporting you like that, stick with it because it makes a difference. And it makes a difference in tangible ways. In our community right now, in our society rather, having a college education is so critical to economic success. And you may think that getting out of college right now, getting a job paying $10, $15 an hour, I can make it, I can buy a car, I can do some things. Well, that might suit you in your 20s, but by the time you get married, have a family, or even just get older, if you don't go down that route and you want more, that $15 an hour is just it's going to be limiting. And whereas if you get a college education and you can you can run the statistics, your lifetime earnings will be hundreds of thousands of dollars more than if you just had a high school education or just a few years of college. Stick with it, and you can do it. You can do it.
Thank you so much, Gregory. So we love that advice. Tenacity. Stick with your dream and believe in yourself. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, have a good one.
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Gully, theme song. NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.
If you enjoyed my podcast, please subscribe. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you for your continued support.